Thanks for listening to Creative Control. While I have you here, please consider supporting Youth Empowerment and Support Services, otherwise known as YES. Based in Edmonton, Alberta, YES provides immediate and low-barrier overnight and day shelter, temporary supportive housing, and individualized wraparound supports for young people aged 15 to 24. They work collaboratively within a network of care focused on the prevention of youth homelessness by providing youth with the necessary supports to stabilize their housing, improve their well-being, build life skills, connect with community, and avoid re-entry into homelessness. Learn more about how to donate or otherwise support YES by visiting yess.org.
Hey, this is Trevor from Halifax, calling in to say that I support Creative Control on Patreon because I think long-form arts journalism is a crucial part of music culture, and there's simply not enough of it out there today. Vish is a master interviewer, he lands great guests, and he has his finger on the pulse of the ever-changing music landscape, both here in Canada and abroad. For all of these reasons and many more, I think you should support Creative Control on Patreon too.
To make your flexible monthly donation to Creative Control, please visit patreon.com/Creative Control today. I'm Visha's wife, and I will love him no matter what you do. And now he has me on the record saying that.
Joe Casey is a wondrous lyricist and lead singer based near his hometown of Detroit, Michigan. Over the past decade and change, Casey has fronted Protomartyr, one of this century's most significant underground rock bands, which also features guitarist Greg Ahee, drummer Alex Leonard, and bassist Scott Davidson. Protomartyr's astounding sixth album is called Formal Growth in the Desert and was released by Domino Records on June 2nd, 2023. As such, Joe returned to this show for a good talk about things like moving out of his childhood home and the death of his mother, knowing more about one's family history, how the pandemic prompted questions about a band's viability, but also inspired new ideas for Protomartyr, systemic societal issues and how having his home repeatedly burglarized inspired Joe to write some new songs, disinformation and misinformation, the Detroit Tigers, funny lyrics and dark packages, how the Wu-Tang Clan influenced Joe's penchant for enigmatic songwriting, where some of the sounds and songs on Formal Growth in the Desert may have come from, touring, other future plans, and much more. A part of the Entertainment One network with the support of listeners like you who follow and subscribe to this donor-driven podcast and spread the word about it, and make flexible monthly donations at patreon.com/Creative Control, which is the primary source of revenue for all the work that goes into this podcast every week. Thank you to all of you who support the show in this way, and if you can, please consider doing so at patreon.com/Creative Control. With additional support from Blackbird Music, a well-stocked record store with locations in Edmonton and Calgary, Alberta, and very friendly employees who will happily help you source special orders. Hey, say you want to get every album by Protomartyr. Hey, go to blackbird.ca, type in the names of the albums or the band or whatever. I don't know, you know how to type things. And then it'll tell you what's available, and it'll either tell you got to come to, you got to take a flight all the way to Alberta to pick it up at the store, or if you live in Edmonton and Calgary, you can just come in and get it. Or they might be able to ship you your Protomartyr records. It's just that easy. Go to blackbird.ca and support our local record stores. Thank you very much. Plus, in-kind support from Pizza Trocadero, The Bookshelf, and Planet Bean Coffee, respectively, in Guelph, Ontario, and Grandad's Donuts in Hamilton, Ontario. This is episode 778 of Creative Control, featuring the lovely and talented Joe Casey of Protomartyr, one of my favorite guests on the show, with your host, me, Vish Khanna.
That's how elimination dances through the time and time and time. That's how elimination dances through the time and time and time. That's how elimination dances.
Hi, Joe. How's it going?
It's going. I'm here.
It's great to have you here, and I'm glad you're here. Where in the world is here exactly?
In Detroit, currently. Actually, just outside of it, in a little suburb called Farmington, and that's where I'm at.
How long have you been in Farmington again? Because I gather from some of the info I got about this new record that maybe there was some relocation or something. Is that right?
Yeah, we moved here in December of last year, so fairly new.
And moved from a pretty, a place you'd been a long time. Is that right?
Yeah, my childhood home. I've lived there my whole life, except for when I went to college, and moved out of there in the summer, and then lived in an apartment in Detroit for a while till I was able to move into this house, which used to be my brother's house.
Oh,
so
is it a prerequisite for you to only live in houses that have housed family members?
With the amount of money I make being in the celebrated international band Protomartyr, yes, I have to move into a house that was formerly owned by one of my family members.
I see.
Yes.
Yeah. Listen, I want to offer my condolences. You and I have talked about your mother on this show before, and I understand she's passed away. So I just want to express my sorrow for you. How are you holding up?
Well, thank you. Pretty good. I mean, this was much different than my dad dying, which was very sudden. Mom had Alzheimer's for over a decade, and it was a slow process. And so when she did pass away, she passed away in this house with my brother, and it was very peaceful. And, she had many days before that weren't peaceful. She was in a lot of pain and confusion, and her body was shutting down. So the fact that she went so peacefully was a blessing. And what was very odd was her younger brother died the day before. So there was 2 deaths back to back. And then just about a month ago, her older brother died. And so now all 3 of them have left us in the span of 2 years. So, it's just, they're the age, it's the they just start going.
Well, that's extremely sad. I'm so sorry. That's I can't even imagine that. Do you think that's sorry? I don't mean to get into this, but you think it's age? Is it a coincidence? Do they share similar issues or something?
No, because my mom pretty much died from complications of Alzheimer's. Eventually, kind of. I believe it was probably a heart attack or something. My Uncle Dan had cancer for many years, and he was I don't think he died of cancer necessarily, but I think after years of fighting it, his body just kind of gave out. And my oldest Uncle Tom, I think he had like organ failure basically he was in his 90s when he died. So being the oldest, but yeah, it's just, when they get up there, it's always something.
Yeah. Well, again, I'm so sorry. And, I don't mean to pry too much, but I do think you have in your history and on this record, as a songwriter, I do think it's fair to say you reflect upon your family, reflect upon the life you lead, and maybe why you've arrived at where you've arrived. And for most of us, that stems from how we were brought up, so to speak. This is a weird one, and I don't know how. I feel fortunate. I haven't gone through this yet. But I imagine as a child, to lose your parents, you beyond the loss in the morning, you feel, is there a feeling of feeling like kind of unmoored or something? Like, I don't know how to, do you know what I'm getting at?
Yeah. I mean, it sounds kind of trite, but you're like, well, I'm an orphan, and any connection you had from your birth is kind of completely gone. There's always, and it still comes up to this day, even though like my mom had been hard to communicate with for like the last 8 years. There's a treasure trove of knowledge that goes with them of like your family history, or like, and you're like, oh, I could just ask dad, or I could just ask mom. And then you realize that's completely cut off. And so that's kind of like the biggest thing is it's just like, luckily I've got 2 brothers, but you have to kind of work on like, oh, I guess we're still a family. We still hang out, like it's because the parents kind of keep the family together. When they're gone, you actually have to make the effort to show up for events and things, it just becomes different, it seems like the final thing to become an adult as that happens, you know.
Yeah. I keep I have this project in the back of my mind that I want to interview my parents and ask them about their history, because they come from India. In a way, we just heard dribs and drabs, bits and bites, if you will, of like what it was like.
Right.
Where do they come from? What do they know about their relatives? And I keep meaning to do it. And this is another stark reminder that I need to do that. So anyway, sorry, I'm just trying to relate to something I can't relate to yet, and I don't want to have to relate to, I guess.
No.
Yeah. So sorry.
And you never want to do that kind of thing too early, because your parents are like, I'm still here. What are you doing? Like, that seems like because I always thought about doing something like that. And, you know, my parents were too active up to the point until they weren't, where it's like, oh, some other time, you know. It's always, they don't, you know, people don't want to think about dying. So it's always, it's got to be presented more like, yeah, your family history. Like, yeah, I wish I have a vague story of how my parents met, and then, you know, I would probably lose details over time, and, you know, but I guess that's just part of life, is that these stories kind of slowly fade into the ether, you know?
Yeah. So that's what you have, the vague history. And I guess I wonder, one of the reasons I haven't done it for myself, and maybe one of the reasons I hadn't thought of that necessarily, the discomfort of someone being like, oh yeah, you think I'm done? That's why you're asking me all these questions.
Yeah.
But I never even thought of it that way. For me, I sometimes wrestle with like, what am I trying to learn? What will I, you know, what do we gain from learning about different generations of our family history exactly? I mean, for some people, there's all sorts of things now too. There's an emphasis on, there's TV shows about ancestry, whatever that. But like, what do we gain from that? What do we gain from learning, maybe if you're an American, that your great, great, great uncle fought for the Union or the Confederacy? Like what? Oh no, like yeah, some of it's not going to be fun. But have you thought about like, what would I gain by delving into my family history? What would it actually tell me about who I am now? Like I say, I think you've done some of this in your work for sure. I'm thinking about it, but do you feel like there's a lot to gain from these kinds of conversations?
I mean, sometimes it can be interesting. I know my parents told me that because they were telling their vague stories, they remember like their grandparents telling them, and there was always the one relative that fell off a boat. And so that seems to be like a euphemism for probably jumped off a boat, maybe. And then there was the one great uncle or something that was kicked by a horse. And I think that was like an old euphemism for maybe not being mentally all there. You know, like, oh, he got kicked by a horse, you know? So that kind of stuff is fascinating. But yeah, I don't think you're going to learn any secret code or anything to like why you are the way you are because your great grandparents ate potatoes or something, you know? Like, yeah, there's no necessary corollary, but
I hope I don't sound ahistorical in a very ahistorical time. Like that sort of stuff is permeating the culture of like, why do we have to think about let's just perform this wide cultural erasure so that we ignore all of the problems, systemic problems, like, you know, where they came from. I hope I don't sound like that.
No, but I think there is a rise of, you know, a certain type of right-wing people that are kind of leaning into eugenics and stuff and trying to, you know, and so vaguely sometimes looking into your past can sometimes feel like, you know, I got to make sure the bloodline is pure or something. There's like that sort of aspect of it. But yeah, I mean, I find it fascinating, but I don't think you're going to necessarily learn anything too important.
Yeah, could be the case. I still want to, again, stories like yours and losing people. I think it's very natural for someone like in my position to be like, fuck, I better do something about this before I can't. So in any case, I appreciate your candor. Yeah, I'm supposed to head back to Ontario this summer, so maybe I'll bring some gear with me and try to finally do it so that it's captured well. And all. You know what an audiophile nerd I am.
Yeah, they're probably used to this. Like, oh, here we go. There's the microphones.
Now, I want to commend you on this brilliant new record. It's nice to hear from Protomartyr again because it's been such a weird time. And I've been waiting for more and more people to be like, I think we're done, actually. How close? I only ask this not to be untoward or make things uncomfortable, but I feel like that conversation during this pandemic period did occur within the band.
Yeah.
Is that correct? Like, is it viable and meaningful for us to keep doing this? Did you guys have that chat?
Yeah, I mean, I did a couple interviews around the time. I might have even talked to you when we were trying to push the last record, Ultimate Success Today, which was about dying and sickness
Yeah.
at the height of the pandemic. And yeah, it was just, and I was surprised. Like, I did these interviews and then people were acting like, oh, Protomartyr is breaking up. And I had to think like, well, I would think that every band would have to have this conversation because no one had any idea when you could tour again or what the world was going to look like at the other end of this. And so it seemed like just a realistic opinion to be like, well, this might be the end of it.
Yeah.
So like just from a financial part like that, the money dried up and it was like, well, this probably is not working. And more importantly, I don't know about you, but like it hit we as a band were pretty depressed for that first year where we didn't do anything.
Mm-hmm.
We knew friends bands that would be like, oh, we're going to do like a Zoom concert or we're going to Zoom and work on albums and, I'm going to do a side project. We didn't do any of that. We had no desire.
Yes.
I mean, it's kind of morbid, but I was actually happy that we were all kind of equally depressed. There wasn't one of us that was like, oh, that's, we were all kind of going through our own thing separately, but it was good to not feel like, I was the one that was holding them back or something. Greg didn't pick up a guitar. Our guitar player didn't pick up a guitar for a year. Yeah. There was no inspiration from that period at all. So yeah, it was pretty dire. And then it was trying to figure out whether or not it was worth to keep doing this. And it kind of slowly came about over like a little bit of period of time where, let's just try to work on one song and not worry about trying to work on an album. Let's not do a big tour.
Yeah.
Let's do a small tour. And, certain things happened that kind of helped us get out of it, but it was not guaranteed at all.
Well, during a very confusing and fractured time, I assume the reason you bring up the fact that everyone was depressed is at least you were galvanized around like, we're not going to do things that we think are corny or cheesy or don't feel like our band. Right. And I think that can create divisions. Well, look, hey, like I'm sure there are bands who are like, well, look, everyone else is doing some semblance of this. Can't we do something that fits within our aesthetic? But it sounds to me like I get it. You're not happy you were all depressed. But we're all on the same page. Perversely and self-consciously, I could not keep up with the demand to do interviews because people were home. Right. And they'd had all this stuff they were hoping would come out. And then some of it did. Some of it was delayed. And I couldn't. It was the only way to. I've been doing remote, Joe, you and I don't think we've ever done an in-person interview. Have we? I don't think so. No. We've met.
I think I met you once in Toronto. Yeah.
We met in Toronto and Guelph, I believe.
In Guelph, that's right.
Yeah, where I used to live.
Twice.
Yeah, we met a couple times in person, but no, and I mean...
Yeah, never with a microphone, never like really asking some questions.
No, but it's been this because this is all I've been doing living in Canada for a long time. So for me, I was like, I guess I'll just keep doing this, and I was marveling at how much stuff was coming out. People trying to make up the loss from, road work and all that stuff. So I just wanted, you asked, so I was depressed. I am still confused as to what we're all doing. Yeah. And, but I do feel a little like self-conscious because I think in a way, people like me sort of flourished because we were online workers, if you will. I don't know how else to put that. But anyway, you know what I'm saying? Yes, because you already had the microphone and the headphones and the camera. Yeah. Just doing doing these Zooms today, I'm like, this gives me the creeps because it reminds me of that period where like I had to Zoom. And so this album is about death and dying. Yes, it is. please buy this record while this is going on. So it was different for everybody, but I feel like, if anything, hopefully we can be the representatives of the side that did not learn a new language and did not learn how to bake bread and did nothing to improve themselves. Because that was definitely us. But I think for those of us who follow the band, we hear invention and experimentation, for lack of a better word, maybe on this new record. Would you, I'm not, this is not to suggest you sat on your laurels or whatever the expression is. It did seem like something shifted within the band aesthetically. Is that a fair assessment based on this record?
Yeah, kind of what happened was Greg and I talked about a year into it, and then one thing he brought up, which I thought was very interesting, he's like, going through this, people are like constantly reminding you, like, you're, as long as you get through a day, like you've accomplished something, because like don't think you have to go out and learn 5 languages. Like the fact, and he's like, I think that's starting to be like a bad thing to strive for. Where if you're just like, well, I survived another day, it becomes almost too easy. And so he, to kind of get himself out of the rut, was starting, like, he was asked to do the soundtrack to a few short films. And so I think he was like, well, this is good because this is not Protomartyr, and I can kind of work the muscle again. And then we were going to do these little tours, and Kelly Deal was still up to doing them, and she was going to do like all of 2020 with us. And so she's like, I'll still do them.
Yeah.
And so that we're like, well, if we're going to go on these little tours, we should probably like write 1 or 2 songs just to have something new to offer these people. And so that was kind of the impetus to slowly start working again. And Greg always has an odd notion at the beginning. It ends up being very clever. On Ultimate Success Today, he's like, I think I want to add more jazz influences. And you're thinking, oh, well, that's going to be awful. It's going to be our shitty jazz record. We don't know jazz. And then it ends up working out. And then you're like, okay. And so this one, he's like, I've been listening to a lot of Ennio Morricone, and I think I want to bring that influence in. And I'm like, oh no, am I going to have to like sing along to sounds of whips and harmonicas? And is this going to be like Protomartyr's country western album? And then that's not how it ended up at all either, because like he just kind of became obsessed with the pedal steel and like how to use it in a way that would be not country-ish or not like the typical way. And I think he achieved it. So yeah, we're always, because we had, the past was burnt to the ground, we were able to start fresh. And, it sounds corny, but it was like the second chapter sort of thing where the most interesting thing is that I think we were probably burnt out from touring so much before COVID. And if a good thing happened was that it was taken away from us, so we were able to enjoy it more and enjoy. It could have been taken away, and then we were able to do it again. We appreciated what we had. So I think that was a benefit too.
So I don't mean to be trite either, but this is the equivalent of you learning languages and learning how to bake bread. Is taking the time, taking the time to. All I'm getting at, I was joking, but my point is, I think sort of expanding one's horizons is maybe what we're getting to. That people had the time, and in some cases, the inclination to be like, A, what the hell is the point of anything? And B, why don't I try something different? Why don't I try? This is a reset. Like for a brief period of time, I thought we were all positively going to reset things that we had been doing. And to be honest, now there's the friction of like, why are people still working from home? Why are people still wearing masks? Like we've got that going on right now. But at the same time, there was this consciousness of like, we could do things a bit better than we've been doing them and everyone would benefit. You know what I mean? I
miss that sentiment because we've gone back on the road, and it's like, I do remember like, boy, when touring comes back, we got to make it, more equitable and better. And I've seen nothing but it being maybe worse. Like it almost came back, worse than before, because in the time during quarantine, a lot of like smaller venues closed. A lot of the big corporations conglomerated and bought up a lot of things. And the bigger touring companies kind of, the ticket prices went up.
Everything's up.
So, it was a very nice sentiment that we're going to do things differently. I mean, that's kind of what the first half of the album is about a lot. It's we all collectively decided like, well, that happened. Let's just put blinders on and forget it ever happened. And then we got to go to work. You got to go back to work, and some of that is, the inherent human drive to continue and to strive until the last breath. But then some of it seemed like, just forget about all those people that died and how poorly we handled this. It's, we'll never let that happen again. And of course, it's going to happen again, and it's going to be just as bad because I feel like we didn't quite learn all the lessons that we probably should have.
Is it too simplistic to ascribe most of this selfishness and, I don't know, I will say irrational behavior? Because I will, by the way, I agree. And I get what you're picking up on. Like when I mention that sentiment, I'm not saying it's here now. I'm saying it was for a brief window. It felt like, well, no one knows what to do. So maybe we'll just start to ponder how we can live. But it only was weeks maybe of that. And then quickly, like, how do we get things back to normal? What I was coming from though there is, do you think it's too simplistic to simply ascribe this to capitalism? Or is there something else? The selfishness inherent in that? Like, because if I think about what is going on, that's the only thing I can think of, really, is that it's about money. And I know that's, again, it sounds very simplistic, but I can't see any other reason for what is happening of like, you're not going to restaurants anymore, so we got to get that going because there's taxes. You know what I'm getting at there? Like, do you think it's, am I wrong?
No, because I mean, I feel like you could probably, even in a broader term, just be like, well, it's the human desire for self-preservation and, you know, self-regard. And what is the systematic expression of that? And that's probably capitalism, where, you know, you need to capitalize on everything. And so, I mean, it's definitely an odd time where, you know, when do you stop wearing a mask and when do you stop, you know, and it's easy for me as a, you know, over the hill fellow to like think like, oh, it's slow down. But if I was in high school during that period of COVID, I would be very upset that like the most important years of my life was taken away from me. And I need that, you know, so I don't think it's completely a terrible thing to selfishly want to move on from that period.
Yeah.
Because, you know, you got to live life. And especially if, you know, you're in the prime of life, you don't want to have like these moments taken away from you. So I
don't know either. And I, for me, I'm just like, science trumps. I didn't mean to say that word. Science should well, that should be what we're following more than like. I agree. Like I can't. I've said this before. My fire. I was an active showgoer. I would go to shows. I mean, I moved to a different city, and then the pandemic happened, so I'm still figuring things out on some level. But I've been to a few things. But my fire for certain things is just gone. Like I don't know what to. I don't know how to explain it. Like I don't feel like going to the movies and I don't know what that says about. I mean, I've you know, people hearing my show know I've talked about this, so I don't mind saying I'm struggling with that stuff. But I also am like, am I struggling or am I just sort of paying attention to things? And you feel crazy when no one else is on some level. So again, I just feel like the push for normalcy when things aren't normal is maybe where you're also coming from by saying when I go out on the road, it's worse. The material conditions are somehow, some way, even worse than they were before. What could be driving that? And so when I ask about one ism to point to, is there anything else you can expand upon in terms of that?
Well, I mean, it seems like when I'm trying to write lyrics for songs, I would love to be able to write about fantastical things that have no bearing in reality. But it's easier to write about what has happened to you. And each album is just like, here's the year period before we went in to record. And it just seemed like coming out of that and then having capitalism kind of twist the screws, especially seeing a lot of like right now, a lot of unions getting ground down or to try to not allow strikes to happen. You know, in America, I thought it was very funny that Joe Biden, who is Mr. Train, he loves trains so much, made it illegal for the train union to go on strike, which it seems against both his love of trains and his democratic principles. So all these things are happening, and then you're trying to get through your day to day, and it seeps in different ways. Just by touring, you see it. So
you earlier you sort of suggested that the first side of this record reflected different aspects, I think, of what we've all been going through pandemic wise, and what you're just describing kind of sociopolitically. I gather the second side has more to do with personal feelings of loss and mourning. Is that a fair assessment?
No, it's both the personal and the political are weaved I sound so, they're weaved in a beautiful tapestry. I feel like in the grand arc of the album, it moves from the desolation of the COVID years and the loss and the feeling of this other uselessness, and then trying to dig yourself out of it and having these different things kind of get in your way. Where it seems like in that arc, like a song like Let's Tip the Creator might seem like a side thing. It's definitely like, well, these giant internet corporations are dehumanizing us and reducing us in different ways, while it's just a rich man's folly for them. And as you're trying to like dig your way out, and these things are pushing down on you, and then finally by the end of the album, you go from this desolation to the Rain Garden, which is a happy ending for a Protomartyr record. It's probably as happy as it's going to get. So
almost,
you have to kind of hold on to it.
Almost a love song?
It is a love song, yeah,
okay.
100%.
I try to, just given your earlier reticence to even accept one of your bandmates saying, let's make a jazz record. Let's echo something from Western films. I don't want to ascribe genre signifiers to you, or moods or tones that maybe you don't hear or see. So forgive me if I ask open-ended questions, but you
well, because especially since I've always, in the past, we'd never written a love song, and I'm sure in interviews I have said there's far too many of them, and I would only, I wouldn't want to write one that doesn't add anything to the canon of great love songs. But I felt like, just for me personally, that was a way out of my depression during this period. So why not acknowledge it, as opposed to just staying on the course of the pessimist, which I had been on. And I still feel myself as a pessimist a lot, but trying to realize that, I did have to kind of let some light into my life to get out of it, so.
I mean, some of the things I'm picking up on here, like I know you were sort of modestly or self-effacingly making fun of your use of the word weaving, weaving of language, but with songs like Fulfillment Center and We Know the Rats, and let's focus on one of them. We Know the Rats, I understand, from what I can gather, was it your own home was burglarized? Is that correct?
Yeah, the house I grew up in, the house I lived my whole life, was burglarized. And when you tell people you live in Detroit, they just assume that you're always dealing with crime and your house is getting broken into all the time. But that was the first time that ever happened.
But it happened multiple times? Is that correct?
Four times in the span of 2 weeks. 2 weeks,
so it was a mark. They
kept on coming back. And the first time I walked into the house, and just like, did one of my brothers come by and leave all the drawers open? This is crazy. And then why they put a chair in front of the door there? That's like, oh, wait, we've been broken into. They just come in the back window. And so they had just explored the main floor, probably because they're worried if somebody's sleeping upstairs, or somebody downstairs. And then I would stay there at night, because what happened was my fiance moved to Detroit. I got her to move from Arizona to Detroit. I won. And so we're staying at like an Airbnb, but I'm like, oh, we're going to go over to the house. We'll take a look at it, because there's no way that we were trying to look for houses, and they're all way too expensive out of our, so that house is going to be our house that we were going to live in. And so the weeks that she came is when this started happening. And so that was a bad introduction. So I'd have to go back and forth between where we were staying in the house. And so some nights I'd be sitting there with a baseball bat, and then nothing would happen. And then the day that I'm not there, it would get broken into again. So somebody was definitely scoping the place out. And so each time they would break in, they'd go through more and more stuff. And after a while, they're just going through 60 years of antiques and junk, which was kind of interesting, because they're dredging up things that I had never seen, or they're pulling like old letters out of the basement, and you're like, oh, this is, by the end, there was nothing. Like at one point, like one of the last times they broke in, got into the house, and there's a trombone sitting by the front door. So you can tell they're like, should I steal the trombone? No, I'll just leave it. So they,
but they did take something.
Oh yeah, they took like the first time they took my laptop, which had a bunch of Protomartyr stuff on it,
Ah, shit.
some of mom's jewelry that had been there, you know, some other things. But like by the fourth time, they're probably looking for like old silver coins or something like that, or like old, you know, some
Jesus.
sort of thing hidden away, you know.
Joe, I'm so sorry. You've gone through so much horrible
Well,
shit in the last couple of years.
but again, now Joe trying to apply better thinking to it, that house was falling apart and it was full of junk.
Hmm.
And it would have taken a big effort to decide to move out of that house, or a choice that I was probably holding on to it as almost a museum to the Caseys, you know, with only
Right.
me as the curator and the only guest, you know. So that forced our hand to clean the house up. We ended up selling it to a next door neighbor. So we kept it. And then the experience kind of reinforced with me. I was very, you know, upset at the thief, the burglar, for robbing me. But then, you know, you contact the cops and they don't come.
Yeah.
You call them and they say, well, do you have a gun or a security system? And you say no. And then they said, well, that's why they did it. So they basically blame you for the crime. And then they don't even have your address. And then you go to get the police report and you see that 4 different detectives were assigned to the case, and they all filled in falsely that, oh yeah, we had checked in, and, you know, no updates, you know, no. So immediately you go from hating the thief to hating the system, and you start thinking like, well, why is this guy breaking into my house and basically trying to like take, you know, costume jewelry out, things that are not worth that much money. And you're like, well, he obviously needs the money. And why does he need the money? Well, because in Detroit right now, it's impossible to buy a house. Rents are skyrocketing. All the houses are being bought by these corporations that are, you know, slapping some shitty paint on it and charging triple, you know, and there's no jobs, and you know, money is stagnant in America. And then you start saying, well, why did they tell me to get a gun? Like, why are they immediately like, you need to be scared of the thief? Well, it's just the same people that say you gotta be scared of the immigrants, or you gotta be scared of, you know, and then so immediately my mind is going up to like, well, the real problem is much bigger than a guy breaking into my house. So that's what We Know the Rats is about. It's basically just focusing the energy away from the, oh, woe is me, and more like, what can I do to take care of that feeling, I guess.
For what it's worth, it's a very noble approach to this, and it's exactly what I was trying to get to, is that weaving you talk about of words and magical meanings or whatever is really present in a song like that one, where you've taken a personal experience but then tried to dial into the kind of socio-political or cultural implications. Like, why is this even happening?
Right.
Do you feel, and like I say, you're out, like, what I'm picking up on here is a guy, you, Joe, who's gone through this calamitous thing that all of us have gone through and are trying to reflect some of that experience, but you've also gone through some deeply personal things. And in a way, they're all related, like the loss of your family, your mother in particular, this attack on your house, her house, what it means to have a clean slate, like to move, to fall in love, to get engaged. Like, there's a lot of that stuff is weaving. Again, I don't mean to keep calling back to that word.
It's a good word.
Feels to me, yeah, I think for this record in particular, right? Yeah, but I'm sincere. Like, almost every song I think has some aspect of this. I hate to invoke the personal as the political, but it seems conscious on, because it's I don't even know if that makes any sense in this case, but I kind of think it does. It seems to me that each, if I can generalize, you do a lot of this throughout this record, of connecting threads, again, weaving. Is that fair? Yeah,
because I mean, I am no policy expert. I have no correct way to go about changing policy, I don't like songs that are just, you know, you don't want, protest songs are very hard to do, because you don't want to come across as hectoring or knowing more than the person listening to you. And so it's important you need to talk about what's happening in your own life and how you got to this point, and kind of admitting that you don't know what you're doing, but this is your opinion, and you've gotten to this opinion through these experiences. And those are for me the best songs where it's a story song, or at least there's impressions of a story that gives the song meaning, and it's not just empty words. Or I would love just to, let's eat the rich. That'd be great. But I don't know exactly how you go about eating the rich, like how to prepare the rich. I don't know the process to get to eating the rich, but they do seem to be a problem. And it seems to be a lot of the man-made problems on earth that we could fix seems to be a lot to do with the people that are in charge.
Yeah.
Would I be any better at it? Probably not. If somebody offered me a large sum of money, I would probably shut up, but no one is going to, so I don't need to worry about that. So
we're in a weird zone right now where I think a lot of us are pointing out problems, in most of the cases that I can think of, with the hopes that the pointing to the problems leads to also pointing people to solutions. But
yes.
There's a lot of problem pointing out now, and then there's the kind of despair at things not changing. And that's really getting, when you talked about the depression that people might have felt, yourself included, like that's still where I'm at. That kind of like, what the fuck? Clearly there are some things we could have learned and done differently, but there's just this push to not do that. So as an observant songwriter, to point these things out and to make them your own stories at the end of it, and now the record's starting to circulate. What brings you any measure of hope? What gives you any measure of like, I got to something there? I'm sure that you're not someone who thinks this could lead to something. Me writing a song, for crying out loud.
Right.
But, I totally appreciate that. But on some measure, you've got me talking about some of your ideas. You've got your fans talking about some of these ideas. Is there even a small part of you that thinks by conveying what you convey, someone might think a little bit differently and maybe that'll spread in some way? Do you know where I'm coming from? I don't want to put you in a position where you sound pretentious. Or
I'll go there myself. Yeah. Where's the spot you want me to stand at? The pretentious corner. No, because it's okay. I think a lot of people, they despair, and I would love to blame the internet, but just the way we receive information about society or what's going on in the world, I think a lot of people feel like they cannot relate to anything. Like if you go on Twitter, the people on the left talk in a very similar way to the people on the right, except their points are different. And boy, here comes the pretension. The discourse is unrelatable to the average person. They don't know the point scoring and thing. And so you're trying to find a third way where you're like, one of the major problems in America is the populism that the right has kind of taken over, where people with honest concerns are given the wrong answers, very populist, why are we so poor? Well, it's the Chinese, it's this, it's that. Like, these people are getting very specific answers from very evil people. And you want to somehow express, you are right to feel concerned about things. The answers are much more difficult, and you need to kind of slowly get people to see that. And it's not as simple as, the thing that's happening now. There must have been a meeting in some back room where the Republicans were like, we really need to go after trans people because nobody quite understands it.
Yeah.
And that would be a perfect thing to, if we get rid of trans people, your life will be better. Or if we just, this is the new thing that's coming to get you. And so I understand people not understanding, trans rights or issues behind trans people because maybe they haven't experienced somebody in their life, or it's new to them. But there's a way to explain it to them that doesn't sound like you're a complete idiot for not understanding it. But the people that are the evil people are like, no, you're correct in thinking that it's weird and evil, and I'm going to, I'll be your voice. So I feel like there's people coming in and taking these people's voices and making them bad. The trans issue is a weird example, but like there's a lot of that going on. Like, we didn't have a moment to celebrate getting rid of Trump, because he didn't go away, and there's a lot more guys coming up that are less stupid than Trump and more effective at taking away rights, like taking away abortion rights, taking away workers' rights, and you know.
But don't you think that with the book bannings, the attacks on universities and colleges,
Yes.
voter disenfranchisement, I feel like the last, what year is it? It's 2023. So in the last 7 years and counting, and prior to that even, let's go back to some of the Republican architects of misinformation.
Yeah.
I am, if you think about all the stuff that's trying to be erased or further marginalized, I think we're in a weird pivot point from misinformation to complete disinformation, keeping people completely uninformed as much as possible. I made this argument recently with someone, or it was more clumsy, I suppose, but I feel like in an overarching sense, that's the worldwide, that's the conservative movements and oppressive movements' main goal, is keeping people disinformed, not even misinformed, disinformed. Right. Am I wrong do you think that's a stronger thing that's happening now? I know it's always, the two are intertwined in sort of political theater and the way people control and mediate information. But this seems like this, again, I can't open up any of these apps without seeing libraries being defunded. Yeah. Books, like bookshelves, just empty. That's disinformation, isn't it? Does that make sense? Am I using the wrong term? It's
No, it's
yeah.
It's because it used to be let's muddy the water and amplify fringe ideas, and just so like what is truth, and we'll never know the true answer. But now it's less that and less the people that are like banning books are saying they've been telling you a lie about everything. The Civil War was not about slavery; it was about states' rights, or we need to go like they've been teaching you the wrong history. And we need to give you like the new history where, and that seems new. And
it's new, right? It is new.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I don't.
Yeah. I mean, or especially like maybe it was a fringe thing, but now the Republican Party is so amazingly fringe now. I don't know how they get out of it. I mean, I think they have to go all the way. They have to eat their own tail, because I don't know how they get out of this kind of thing where they're like, we all agree that slavery wasn't such a bad thing, or like quit picking on white people. But I mean, that is the base that they're trying to maintain and holding on to. The only hope I see is that America is getting less old and white. Of course, they'd say that's the great replacement theory, which is a racist concept, but now is being put into the mainstream. So it's very bizarre.
Yeah, and I appreciate you pointing out that maybe younger people will help us here.
I keep on seeing charts where they say, "Oh, they're more liberal and they're more into like personal freedoms and all that." But I notice whenever they show these charts, the older I get, Generation X used to be the generation that was going to take it to the man. Yeah. And now like we're edging up as the older we get, more and more conservative and more, I worry that is maybe the ingrained in getting older, is that you just, move more that way. And why leave it up to the younger generation to fix everything?
Well,
that's always
but I do think some of these, if I may, I will disparage people. Some of the conservative and nefarious conservative dummies usually rip off ideas from others. And I do think that we've just gone through a pretty radical situation with things like Twitter and Facebook, where heinous people were deplatformed. And some of us were like, fucking good. I'm sick of that fucking guy. But now what's happening is like, you want to deplatform our people? Guess what? We're deplatforming your books. We're deplatforming your whole media entities and discrediting them. So this spiteful tennis match, that this polarized, I hate to say polarization because it sounds like an out. I think people are demonstrably more brazen about being really good and decent and really, really awful. And I've never seen this in my lifetime. I'm just like, I'm going to be a brazenly terrible person, but gaslight you and tell you I'm not. So I don't have I'm trying to keep us focused. Some of this stuff is swimming around on your record. on some level, I would guess.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Then there are sort of weirdly fun songs, maybe like 3800.
Yeah.
3800 Tigers is not necessarily fun, but there's a I don't know. You invoke the Detroit. You're wearing, as people can't see it, Joe's sporting proudly a Detroit Tigers hat. There's some sort of baseball stuff that floats around this record. Even, is that fair?
Yeah, especially on that song.
Yeah.
And that's one where I always like these kind of songs where I have 3 or 4 different ideas, and instead of trying to maybe weekly build them up to carry their own song, I'm like, I'll just jam them all together, and maybe the way they bounce off each other will spark something. So the band brings this very heavy rock song, and I'm like, great, good. Now I have to figure out how to hold on to it. And I had been looking up and seeing how few wild tigers there were in the world, and the number, I think when we first wrote the song, it was 3,600 tigers, and then I saw, oh, there's 200 more somewhere popped up. So that was always kind of like a starting point. We're like, oh, there sure are not very many tigers in the world, but there are a lot of idiots.
Yes.
And then it was like, well, I'm talking about the tigers. I don't want to do a whole song about how people are fucking idiots. Let me talk about the Tigers. And so the Detroit Tigers. So Sweet Lou is a reference to Lou Whitaker, who was on the 84 Tigers, who won the World Series. And that came along right when I was the perfect age to fall in love with baseball, because the team won the World Series. It hasn't been the same since, but to honor him, because he's not in the Hall of Fame. And then I started thinking about, like, what would baseball look like in the future?
Yeah. And
that's kind of where the final half comes in, or the final third of the song comes in. And also the Eat 'em Up Tigers was something that a person used to hang outside the Tiger Stadium would chant, and to get money. And, everybody loved him, and he was a character. And he died in a hit and run several years ago. And I thought, well, let's try to bring that chant back, Eat 'em Up Tigers, which always seemed a little graphic, but also very funny.
Yeah.
And so it's just a way to, I hope that's the thing. Even though we started with my mom dying and we moved into the problems of the world, I do feel like every Protomartyr record has what I think are funny songs on them, but they kind of get tamped down by the general tone sometimes. But life is not like that. You don't live your life in a constant state of horror, or or sadness. That even, there are jokes even on the saddest day, and there's no way to stop that. So you might as well embrace it. So I try to put funny songs in every album.
Is there another one you want to cite about? Because I picked up on that. It made me sort of smile.
Mm-hmm.
Like you're absolutely correct. A Protomartyr song that is ostensibly funny,
Right.
Probably makes someone like me at least be like, should I be laughing at this? It's delivered in such a dark tone.
Right.
Is it actually a comedy? But then I read the lyrics and listen to it, and I'm like, oh no, it is. I think it's funny.
Yeah.
And I will tell you, at the risk of making myself sound stupid, Joe,
Okay.
you're one of these writers, whereas I'm listening and then reading the lyrics, I'm like, okay, I've got to look up that word. I got to look up that person. I got to look up this. I don't understand what that means. I like that. That is not a criticism.
Right.
I'm like, oh, Joe is just dropping like, where is it even? There's a weird thing here. By the way, I appreciate how make way, the last lines are make way for tomorrow. Next song, for tomorrow. That's what it's called.
Right.
That is funny. That's a funny idea. That's funny. I like that.
Yeah.
But then what I want to get to is the opening verse of the song Make Way. Welcome to the hungry earth, the living afterlife, where we chose to forget the years of the hungry knife. Now, hungry knife here, for those who can't read what I'm reading, is capitalized, hungry knife. So I'm like, what the heck is that? And then I Google it. Nothing. I got nothing. I don't know what it means. What is that? Sorry, Joe, I don't mean to do this.
No.
I'm just saying two things. One, I appreciate how you drop, I guess they're Easter eggs for people like me to be like, what the hell is he talking about? What is that? Is that Greek? Who is that person? But the other side of it, more specifically, let's talk about the hungry knife for just a second, and any other references that are they like little inside jokes for you almost?
It's definitely sometimes the hungry knife I just capitalized because I wanted to make it sound bigger than it was. And it's basically just a way to talk about COVID without saying when COVID came through.
Ah,
So we're the ones that are left. We went through these years of COVID. It came through. It killed a bunch of us. Now we think that's in the past. So we're going to have a party, and we're getting ready to have a party. And you can either come along with us or not. You can just get out of the way because life is moving on.
yeah,
You got to make way for what's coming.
yeah.
And there's nothing you can do to stop it. So you put on your smile or go hide yourself, because we're going to forget about it.
Yeah.
Inside jokes, definitely. My brother Jim always comes to me he's usually the one that comes with like, oh, I found this weird reference. You should throw that in a Protomartyr song. And he was really into the Gadarene pigs.
Gadarene, yeah.
The story in the Bible where Jesus like throws a demon in a pig, and then the pig falls off a cliff. And so I'm like, okay, that was really kind of mean of Jesus to do that. Good old Jesus. Like, he's kind of showing off there where he's like, how did he do it? And so I thought that was kind of a good, where an ostensibly good person does something maybe a little mean to prove a point. So I made sure to, whenever Jim has a phrase that he wants to get in, I try to stick it in.
So it's your brother. Interesting.
It's my brother. Yeah. Like he definitely, like his, on the last album, The Aphorist, like he pretty much wrote the first verse of that song, because he had a bunch of ideas. I was like, I'll write a song for you. The one that's got the most inside jokes and things is Let's Tip the Creator, because that's just basically Elon Musk,
Bezos.
Bezos type. Mark Zuckerberg is definitely in there.
Yeah.
Just being fools. And the title comes from, we all had a laugh with the band when we watched Mark Zuckerberg's big introduction to the metaverse, where he's in the metaverse and they're floating around and they're stupid and they're like, oh, look, street art. We should tip the artist. And like, that's going to be the future, where you see art and you're going to tip the art.
Okay. Right.
And I just thought that was just such a backwards way to look at the expression of human creativity. Oh, let's tip them. So he thought it was an amazing idea. You can tip artists. Isn't that great? Artists,
So to give people listening a sense of where I'm listening to the new Protomartyr album, but then want to start Googling things, I'm just going to read the first verse.
Okay.
The best I can. I may mispronounce some of these words and names. Talita Kumi had the time of her life, thrashing away to the sound of the lathe of doom, and that's capitalized. In the repurposed machine shop, Herdis Rote flew in from the coast, sampled the wares, drank from the tap, and snaked all your friends in a bid to fit in. That's the first verse.
Yes.
And I'll tell you, I don't think I'm a dumb person. Maybe. But I'm like, I got to look up a bunch of these things. And in some cases I did. In some cases I'm like, I might just ask Joe about this. Anyway, that I don't even necessarily want you to give away everything here today, Joe. We don't even have the time for that.
Right.
I just want people to get a sense. If you want to comment on that verse, please do. But I just want people to get a sense of what you're going to encounter. But those who know Joe Casey's writing and Protomartyr will know this is not unusual to encounter ideas in the context of a song or terms that you're like, where did that come from? I appreciate that. It exhibits a knowledge of things that I like to be provoked into, like, well, I don't know that. It's not simple language. So I want to say I appreciate it. And I appreciate what you're saying about your brother's involvement. Just because I invoked it, do you want to say anything about that verse in particular?
I like to say a lot of times people think that, like, what esoteric references what really influenced me to write these kind of lyrics was just being such a fan of the Wu-Tang Clan growing up.
Oh.
And like listening to like a Ghostface Killer record and trying to pick up on what the references are.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
And with the Wu-Tang Clan, I liked that the references could be a certain kind of food, or a reference to a kung fu movie, or some sort of black Muslim reference, it all mashed into a song.
Yeah.
And so that was an influence where a lot of times people are like, oh, you must read a lot of poetry. Not a lot. I did study Wu-Tang lyrics for many years.
That's amazing. Like, I did the same. And I can recite things and not even know what I'm saying at this point in my life. I can't remember what the reference is. Yeah. That's fascinating.
A specific kind of shoes, a specific kind of cut of fish or something will be in like one line of a Ghostface song, and you're like, okay,
Yeah.
it sounds so cool. What is he talking about? But yeah, I wanted to make reference to that song. Is just a lot of the first two names, Hurtis wrote and Talitha Kumi. Those are more like old. Talitha Kumi is from like the Bible.
Yeah.
And but I actually first came across it as the title of an episode of X-Files. And so that was like, what is the, because they don't, they make a reference to it in the episode of X-Files, and what the hell does that mean? Oh, right. And then Hurtis wrote, so I'm looking for names, and then, but the names as they go on become more direct references to actual people.
Yeah.
Oker Rookslag, Elon is like derived from the word for oak.
Oh.
And Rookslag is, I think, Afrikaner for like odorous or smelly or something like that. So Elon Musk, and then Sugar Mountain is Zuckerberg. That's just, so I get references from X-Files. I'm getting references from, and the Lathe of Doom, I just thought would be, those first two people are kind of like when you live in a place like Detroit, you'll have people come in from New York or something, and they're very rich and they throw their money around and they act like they're really into like, oh, I love how people just work so hard, like they come almost to examine us, like,
yeah.
what, and so the Lathe of Doom, I just thought if you're going to a former machine shop and seeing some noise show or something, there'd be a band called the Lathe of Doom, probably. And that was just, so it's just references from all over, to try to make a overall story. So
listen, I really, really, and I'm sure fans listening appreciate your candor with this and revealing what some of these Easter eggs mean. And for what it's worth, and I don't mean to toot my own horn, I feel a little less dumb. I feel like some of these things I couldn't possibly have known because you made them up.
Yes. And well, years ago when Relatives in Descent came out, people constantly be like, I looked up that story about the horse getting struck by lightning and I can't find references to it anywhere. Like, when did that happen? And I was like, it didn't. I made it up. So that's the fun. You get to make stuff up sometimes, like that's the fun of writing. So yeah.
In this time of, again, I don't mean to invoke this time of people learning different things, but I can't remember if we've talked about this before, Joe. Have you considered like narrative writing? I feel like we did maybe. I did ask about this. Have you considered that as a potential outlet beyond songwriting?
I have. The thing is, I'm very lazy. That's always a problem. And I do know writer friends that get up early and they write for a couple, like they have a schedule.
Yeah.
And I don't know if I could keep to it. The other thing is I've recently started writing a article in the new Cream magazine that's out. Oh. Like I have like a column in each issue.
Oh, I didn't know that. That's great.
Yeah. And then writing that, I'm just like, God, I'm really bad at writing sentences. I'm really bad at like connecting thoughts and, like here's a paragraph. Here's, I get very often to tangents and things. So maybe if I do that enough and I start getting the muscles back to remember how to write things, maybe someday, especially, going through COVID and all that and having the band taken away from me, you realize that at some point the fun is going to stop and I'll have to, either go back into the workforce at a very advanced age or come up with something. So maybe writing's my only way out.
Well, so. I didn't mean to make it a solemn suggestion.
No, that's me.
But I do think you clearly have the eye and ear of a narrative writer. And that comes through in your songs, which I always appreciate and mystified by. So I also want to say thank you for making time for me virtually every time Protomartyr puts out a record so that I can ask you these questions. It means a lot. I just want to say that.
Oh no, and it's always I always look forward to, because I'm like, we gotta check in and see how. And you're still in Alberta now.
Yeah, I'm in Edmonton still? With the rats.
Edmonton,
but there's no rats apparently, right? You told me there was. Right. We had a rat.
Right. And I had forgotten that I had learned that story from an episode of Joe Pera.
Yeah.
So there you go. Yeah.
That's a little callback to a previous episode where I thought Joe Casey was
Yeah.
trying to clown me, and I realized subsequent to that, Joe Parra
Yeah.
himself was on this show.
Cleared it up. I listened to that
I
episode.
tried to clear it up with him, and I think I invoked you, as I recall, maybe even being like, this guy told me this thing. I can't remember. I don't remember everything's a blur. Anyway, my point is, this record's fantastic, and I feel like we've given people a lot. So about it, and I hope you feel like you've conveyed some things. I appreciate your time. If people want to learn more about Protomartyr and this record, is there a place or places that you'd want to direct them to using their computers and telephones?
Yeah, there's always protomartyrband.com. That's our website, and from there there's links.
Yeah.
That way you can avoid having to go on one of these Facebooks or these Instagrams or these Twitters. But we got all that shit too.
Yeah.
But yeah, our website is probably a good portal to get you into wherever you want to go.
Nice. And future plans at this point? Have you begun writing more material or anything like that yet?
No, we are just going to be doing a lot of touring, and again, we speaking of like moving out of houses, we have bad luck with practice spaces. Each practice space only lasts one album, and so we were in a weed growing warehouse was our last practice space, and then that got sold, and so we're currently all the gear is down in my basement, and I don't know if that's a good place to write music, but who knows? We'll see.
Yeah, I would think you're in a different area too. So like people hearing music being played aren't going to be like, oh, that's a place we can rip off.
Yeah, I'm in a new neighborhood. I don't want to upset the neighbors.
Yes.
I just moved in, so we'll see.
Okay. So practicing is a reality too for lots of bands.
Yeah.
Where do we actually get together? So, okay. So I appreciate that. Touring, you mentioned the website. If we can go out in a song from this album, I wonder if you can choose one from the record and let us know why it came to mind.
I am going to pick, if I can pick any one, I think I'd pick The Author.
Oh,
if that one can be played, right now that's my personal favorite, and I picked that one.
Any particular reason why The Author? Is it because I suggested you should become an author?
No. Well, there's two songs in the album, Graph versus Host and The Author, that are both specifically about my mom.
Yes, that's true. Yeah.
And Graph versus Host is, about right when she died, and The Author's kind of a more upbeat about it, and yeah.
She is the author. Author. Yeah, that's very poignant. Okay, well, I appreciate that, and I want to play it for people right now from the excellent new Protomartyr album, Formal Growth in the Desert. This is The Author. Joe Casey, it's always a tremendous pleasure, and if I dare say, an honor to have you on the show as often as you come by. I hope you enjoyed this, and I wish you the best of luck in the future.
Talk to you again soon.
Now I'm gonna tell this one born upon a kitchen table, where she passed away, sleeping across the shoulder of my brother.
Always a pleasure. Always a pleasure to speak with Joe Casey from Protomartyr. This time on the 778th episode of Creative Control, which is part of the Entertainment One podcast network and is available wherever you get your podcasts. If you can't locate an episode that you've heard about and you're looking for it and you don't know where it is, you've looked everywhere. Where is it? Or if you want to learn more about me and sign up for my monthly newsletter, please visit vishkhanna.com. You can like Creative Control currently on the Facebook or follow the show on Twitter at vishcreative, or you can follow me directly on Instagram and on Twitter at vishkhanna. I want to get that blue sky thing. Hey, if you're listening and can invite me to the other thing, wait a minute. The new thing is still owned by the guy who started Twitter, and he's like a Bitcoin guy. I don't even know what's going on. What are we doing? Anyway, I'm on Twitter and Instagram for now, but yeah, everyone's talking about this blue sky thing, and I want to check it out. Got an invite? Send it to Vish. Or don't. I don't care. Whatever. I'm getting too old for this stuff. Also, please visit patreon.com/creativecontrol to make a flexible monthly donation to this donor-driven podcast. $6 American or more grants you access to exclusive content. You get the episodes earlier than everybody else. You get, if you want, you can get a Creative Control t-shirt. I have some left in various sizes. Just message me on Patreon and I'll get you one while supplies last. I got the red or the maroon, burgundy. What's the difference? And then the yellow. I think that's what that color is. Just let me know on Patreon and I'll get you what you want if I can. And again, I really appreciate all the people who contribute to the Patreon. This is ostensibly a donor or dinner-driven podcast. I got to make dinner for my family, and I need to wrap this up. I think that's why that was on my brain. It means a lot. So if you can, please donate to patreon.com/creativecontrol. I appreciate it. Have a nice dinner. Thanks again to the wonderful Alberta record retailer Blackbird Music, which you can learn more about and order things from their website there, blackbird.ca. Also want to thank Pizza Trocadero, The Bookshelf, and Planet Bean Coffee in Guelph, Ontario, and Grandad's Donuts in Hamilton, Ontario for their in-kind support for this show. Thanks to Jim Guthrie for letting me use some music he makes on the show. You can learn more about Jim at jimguthrie.org. And finally, thank you so much for listening to this episode with Joe Casey, who has returned to the show for, I think, the fourth time to talk about Protomartyr. What a thrill. I love talking to Joe. He's so smart. I love his band. This was fun. So if you like this and want to subscribe to Creative Control or follow the show and tell your friends about the show and listen to Protomartyr, I mean, these things are all not connected. All I wanted to say is thank you. I'm a little loopy. I better go. Talk to you soon. Bye for now.